More About Birth is intended for educational purposes only. Please go to naturalcaremidwifery.com to read our disclaimer. Welcome back to More About Birth, another exciting episode. We have our hosts, Shannon Bennett and Angie Hansen, with us today. Hey, guys.
Hey. So it has been forever since we've been to a birth. Are you going through withdrawal?
I am, and I think even more than that, like interviewing people and hanging out on this podcast, I feel like an imposter because it feels like so long. Like, do I really go to births? I really do this thing?
You know, I've been a midwife for I don't know how many years now, a lot of years. I still have moments where I feel like an imposter.
Yeah.
So how long has it actually been? Let's see.
Mine was that transfer.
No, it's been that long?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think
because
so.
I had an assistant at the last two
Hopefully I
births.
still know what I'm doing.
It'll come back to you. Just bring chocolate.
And coffee.
I know. I bet you didn't even know what you were getting into, did you?
No. Nobody ever knows what they're getting into.
Actually, that kind of is what we're going to talk about today, because I don't think half of the people that do home birth or that are even pregnant and having children have any idea what they're getting into.
Yeah.
Or what it's all about. And we were having this conversation the other day, kind of more along the lines of what in the world is the difference anyways between choosing to work with a midwife and do a home birth, or go to even a hospital midwife or an OB and deliver in the hospital.
Yep.
So I feel like there's a lot more responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of what we want to talk about today. And it could go in a number of different directions, but yeah, so kind of the question of the day is, what am I getting into when I choose a home birth? And along with that, what are the benefits and responsibilities? Because
there's a lot of responsibility that you wouldn't even think of.
Right. And it's kind of like with all the amazing benefits of home birth, there's a lot of freedom. I mean, there is a ton of freedom, which is kind of the draw for a lot of people.
Making your own choices, doing it where you want, how you want, with
Yeah,
whom you want.
But on top of that, along with that, there's a huge amount of responsibility.
Yeah.
Informed consent, you have to do your homework. And so we're going to kind of dive into that and talk about all those things, the benefits and the responsibilities.
Let's start with relationship.
Okay.
So the thing that I see is one of the biggest things that's so different is the relationship between you and your provider. It becomes almost more of a friendship. Like, you know, we've known each other forever because I've delivered 2 of your 3 babies, the last 2.
Right.
And so we've known each other for many years now. And it started out as a like midwife client relationship. And through all the time we spent together during pregnancy and labor and postpartum, it became more of a friendship. And then you had another baby and we became closer friends. And I mean, it's even hard. Like, I had someone come in for their 8-week appointment the other day, and they brought me this beautiful gift. And all I'm thinking about is, great, this is the last appointment. I'm not going to see them anymore until they have another baby.
Right. Yeah, I think it's that way probably for, most home birth midwives, where it, by the end of the whole thing, it feels like family. That's how deep the relationship.
I actually cried at my last midwife appointment. I cried on the way home. I was like, oh, it's like a friend I'm never going to see anymore.
People have more babies just so they can come hang out with
They
Shannon.
do. I hear that too. They're like, well, we'll just have another one.
That's right.
Or they'll tell me, no, we won't have any more. And I said, don't say that, because as soon as you say that, you're going to have some.
I'm not sure that's a good birth plan, though.
It's not good birth control, that's for sure.
Right. But yeah, so the relationships, and we were just talking earlier about with that midwife relationship, is honesty is a huge piece, because this goes into your quality of care. So talk a little bit about that.
I can't even take care of someone that isn't honest with me. I had a client years ago that told me she was a first-time mom. Well, in reality, she had had a baby when she was a teenager and gave it up for adoption.
Oh,
and because,
wow.
With midwifery care, you don't always do a vaginal exam early on and a pap smear is customary. So there were no signs physically that I had checked. that would clue me in. She didn't have stretch marks on her belly. She had this nice toned tummy. I mean, there were no clues.
Yeah.
And so we started out this relationship like that, and then partway through, I found out that that was not the story, and it would have changed the whole way that I took care of her. It would have changed the questions I asked her. We would have talked about what her previous experiences were like as far as emotionally, any trauma, you know.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on there, and I've had people not share with me, I had a lady not share with me that she had a major medical problem,
Wow.
and it just would have been a total game changer. I would not even have done a home birth for her.
Right.
So I've got to have complete honesty.
Right, because to do home birth safely, we take healthy moms and healthy
Right.
babies. And
Only
so,
healthy moms and healthy babies.
yeah, there's some things that are contraindicated for home birth, and
Right.
your midwife needs to know about
Right.
those. So that burden of responsibility is, on you as a client to report those things so that,
Well, and I
we
even
know
tell
what's going on.
people, when they come in for a consultation, you're pregnant and you are already parents.
Yeah,
So
right.
already it is your responsibility to make decisions for this baby,
Yeah,
whether it be how they eat, whether or not they exercise, where they're going to give birth, who's a part of that. There's just a whole bunch that plays in.
yeah. So another thing that we talked about, one of the hallmarks of midwifery is preventative care.
Definitely.
We try to see problems coming, head problems off before they even develop. So we're not just running around putting out fires after they
preventative.
happen. So talk to me a little bit about that preventative care, diet, nutrition, how that is specific.
It starts with that first consultation. So I typically take a few notes and just get a little bit of background, like, why did you choose home birth? Why are you even thinking about this? What's your history with it? What has your health in general been like? Have you had babies before? What did those births and pregnancies look like? So then it just, as people come for each appointment, we actually, as midwives, have a list of things we want to make sure we cover so that people are informed.
Yeah.
So that we have a chance to discuss it, they have a chance to get their questions answered, and know that when they make a decision, they've had all the information they need to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
So as the pregnancy goes on, there's different things that we cover.
And how might the importance of nutrition play a part in an out-of-hospital birth setting and be very, very crucial?
Oh, it's big. And Angie is really big on this one. So a lot of times I'll do like a pop quiz. I'll give people a minute and say, okay, what'd you have to eat today? If it's later in the day, or what'd you eat yesterday? And it amazes me, some of the people and the incredible diets they have. And then every once in a while you get someone who said, well, I had mac and cheese for lunch and a McMuffin for breakfast. I had a bag of gummy bears for a snack, and I drank 2 Cokes in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I see trouble in your future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And the reason that is too, I mean, everybody knows some of the hot button issues, but like the glucose, the blood sugar issues, but another huge one is protein. Tell us about why protein is so important.
And there's a lot of controversy on that. Some midwives feel like you don't need as much protein as they've been saying we do recently. But Dr. Brewer wrote a book years ago, and it was really big on protein as far as preventing preeclampsia, high blood pressure, just the whole gamut.
Yep.
I like to see my clients get a good amount of protein, like 60 or more grams. And proteins are the building blocks of red blood cells.
Yeah. Yeah, so nutrition is huge. So again, that honesty with your midwife and reporting those things, you have to take your nutrition seriously because nutrition builds a healthy pregnancy, which builds a healthy labor, which builds a healthy
and moms
postpartum.
who are afraid to gain weight during pregnancy,
Right,
you've got to gain weight.
right.
Because if you're not gaining weight, you're not eating adequate calories. And yes, some moms gain 40 pounds and some moms only gain 25. But as long as they're getting adequate calories and they're eating good, healthy food,
Yep.
a friend of mine always says, eat the rainbow.
Yeah, right.
Eat
all
eat
your
the rainbow.
colors.
Get your protein and eat the rainbow.
Yeah,
So you're
right.
going to get what you need.
Right. Right. So one of the things that I think of as a responsibility going into a home birth is preparation. There's a lot. One of the things I think about is preparation. So reading, listening to podcasts, but doing your homework. So tell me what you see from your perspective, because what I see is a lot of times in our culture, sadly, we don't like to read as much. And so it's like people come into this.
Well, and we're in the day and age of videos also. There's informational things on YouTube.
Oh,
there's things that run through Facebook. There's podcasts. There's podcasts.
Right.
So I don't find that people check out books like they used to. 20 years ago, my library rotated all the time. I have a group of clients that don't use modern technology much, so they are the ones that mostly check out things from my library. Occasionally first-time moms, but for the most part, people want notifications sent to them weekly about what's going on in pregnancy, just short little snippets. No one wants to sit down and actually read.
Right. And so if you see someone who has become a client and they're not asking any questions during their prenatals, you don't see them or hear them talking about
it worries me.
Resources, materials that they're gleaning from. What are some of the problems that can crop up with that?
Just lack of information. There's a lot more fear about what labor is going to be like. I see moms that have not notified me that, for instance, their baby hasn't moved as much as it has been all of a sudden, or that maybe they've been feeling faint a lot lately, which is something new. They'll, because they haven't read or they haven't listened to what I've told them, they don't realize that that's a red flag, that I need to know about those things.
Right.
And also, some of that I think is just the fact that in mainstream obstetrical care, you don't have access to your provider like you do with a midwife. So you tend to not call over every little thing.
Right.
But I need to know those things so I can take good care of you.
Right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the birth itself. So like planning for, prepping for, setting up your birth environment. How, obviously you're birthing at home, so what are some of the things that you have to take ownership of to prep for this event?
Right. I mean, we do a home visit. We've been to home visits at 32 weeks just to kind of check things out, right? We want to make sure that your home has adequate hot water for filling a birth pool, for one thing. A lot of times, honestly, when I'm asking people where things are in their kitchen that I might need, you get a really good glimpse of what their diet's really like by what is in their cupboards. You like to see what they're eating. You want to know that it's a safe environment, that there's nothing domestic going on.
Right.
You are responsible for your pets. I once was bit in the behind by a dog, a little yippy dog, because she was upset that I was touching her mama.
Oh, wow.
So, we talk about things like that, like you're responsible to make sure there's someone to watch your pets. We definitely, for instance, if you have well water and you don't know, you should have it tested to make sure that it's safe to be drinking while you're pregnant. There's just a lot of things that you don't think about that maybe aren't mentioned. There's supplies that you need to gather.
Yeah.
And you've done home birth, so you tell me, what are things that you did to prepare?
Yeah, well, again, this is kind of jumping back to the prenatal portion, but I think that the information is just huge. Preparing yourself, I think especially first-time parents or parents that have not had an unmedicated birth before, you really cannot overestimate how huge this event is and how much it's going to take out of you.
And the tools you may need, as in nutrition, comfort tools.
Yeah, until you've gone through it, I just don't think you totally know how important all those pieces are in the preparation. So at least for me and from what I've seen from other people, the people that prepare the most, whether that's reading or, listening, classes, whatever those things are, the people that prepare the most have the most tools in their bag, mentally, emotionally, to make it through the labor.
And speaking of tools and bags, I find that the people, it's kind of like Murphy's Law, right? If you carry an umbrella, it usually doesn't rain, but you leave the umbrella at home and then it rains.
Right.
So being responsible to sometimes maybe even pre-register at the hospital in case of transport, because sometimes it happens,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
And we can talk about that more later, that
All
it's
right.
time to go to a break. But yeah, let's pick up and talk about that.
We will be right back here with more about birth, so stay tuned. More About Birth is intended for educational purposes only. Please go to naturalcaremidwifery.com to read our disclaimer. Well, welcome back to More About Birth, and I'm here with our hosts, Shannon Bennett and Angie Hansen, and we're having a great conversation about really the whole home birth experience.
Good conversation, a little bit of chocolate. So, as usual, when we're together, we get excited and we start kind of rabbit trailing. So let's refocus, talk a little bit more about working through emotional issues during pregnancy. Kind of the difference when you're working with a midwife and choosing an out-of-hospital birth.
Yeah. Yeah, so we talked about a little bit about the relationship between between a midwife and her client and their family, and how it kind of becomes a family by the end of this whole process. And along with that, we really believe that the emotional issues are huge, and this is something I don't think you're going to see as much in a traditional setting, but midwives really focus in on the emotional issues because...
Well, we just had an appointment the other day like that, you know,
and
without
it's
mentioning
huge.
names. In fact, I've had people tell me before, I almost feel like I just went to a counseling session instead of a prenatal appointment.
Right.
Because it's not just about your body.
Right. Yeah, everything that is your makeup is part of your pregnancy and goes and affects your pregnancy and your baby and your birth.
Your experience.
So, you know, ignoring those emotional issues or life issues or whatever is going on in your life, stress, we know that these things affect your physical well-being. And so spending time going over those and, again, being honest with your provider, because we're going to ask you, how are you feeling?
And I don't expect you to tell me about all your marriage problems or, you know, what your struggles are with your in-laws.
Although you usually get that.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes you do.
Yeah.
And that's good, because usually if you dig below those layers, it's affecting how you've been feeling.
Right.
It's affecting your, you know, emotional status. It's affecting your stress level, which can affect your pregnancy.
Right, yeah. And so just like it's your responsibility to take nutrition seriously in an out-of-hospital setting, to, you know, because we want things to be safe, the emotions are just as much a part of that.
Right.
So, you know, trying to work through your emotional issues and report if you're not able to work through them, or just say like, I'm struggling with fear or anxiety or depression, so that we can either, you know, refer you to somebody or help you ourselves work through
and
those
there
things.
are some things that we can do, just relaxation practice. There's actually some herbs that are safe during pregnancy, during breastfeeding, that we can help these moms with.
Yeah.
You know, some days I joke, I'll tell my husband, I was a counselor today, or, you know, you feel like you wear all these different hats. But I think that's part of being a midwife and why it's different.
Right.
The appointments are an hour long, so you have time to do that.
Right.
And you need to unload some of these things before you go into labor. Just an example would be someone, you know, who's had a history of sexual abuse. They need to be honest with you about it, because it needs to be dealt with, because that can come up during labor.
I think towards the end of labor especially, and you get ready to start pushing, and it's so intense and you're having all these sensations, and that can trigger things hugely. You know, being honest about those things and partnering with your midwife to work through them, to have the best, most satisfying birth outcome that you can.
There's actually a part in our list of things that we like to make sure we cover during pregnancy at the prenatals where we bring up any fear or anxiety about the upcoming birth or anything that you need to work through.
Right.
And we talk about it.
Right.
And sometimes moms will say, no, I'm good. There's nothing. And then you give them a second and they'll be like, well, actually.
Right.
And then it opens the door to talk about that.
Right. Yeah, so that's huge. So that's one of the things. Another thing that we wanted to touch on is informed consent, because, again, this is one of those benefits that we talked about of home birth.
Mentioned a little.
Is that there's freedom. And, typically a home birth midwife isn't going to tell you what you have to do.
No, in fact, people ask me flat out sometimes, what would you do?
Right.
And I can say, this is what I did, or this is what I chose to do. But I will not tell them what to do. I tell them, you're the parents.
Yep.
You need to read about it. You need to ask me questions. You need to research it. You need to pray about it, whatever you need to do. And then come back to me and tell me what you've decided. And then you are responsible for that decision.
Right.
Whether it be to circumcise or not circumcise, to test for Group B strep, or not test for Group B strep, or treat for Group B strep or not treat.
Yep.
Whatever it is.
Right.
Having a vaginal birth after cesarean. I can't be responsible for everybody's everything. They
Right.
have to take the responsibility.
Right. And I think that's a huge difference between an out-of-hospital birth and an
Right.
in-hospital setting, because, the parents really are responsible. And so with that informed consent goes the study and the understanding.
Yeah, it's work.
It's work. It is. You have to
People
read.
ask me about vaccines. I send them home with 3 or 4 books.
Right.
Say, keep them till your final 8-week appointment. Study them, look them over, do
Right.
your research. You need to decide. I can't decide that for you.
But there are all sorts of things that, unless your midwife feels like there's a safety reason that's clearly pointing to why you might need blood sugar testing or an ultrasound or Group B strep testing, these things are optional. And that's huge.
You can refuse anything. And if I feel like it's something you really need, I'll tell you, I really feel like that's something
Right.
that you need.
Right.
You still have the choice, but I'm telling you.
But-
And then it's charted in their chart that we discussed it, I
Right.
encouraged it, and they refused.
And this includes both prenatally and during the birth. So
yes, labor,
you
postpartum.
you have the right to refuse vaginal exams during labor. You have the right to refuse all sorts of
If
different
you don't
things.
want the Doppler used during labor. I'm kind of a stickler about that one, though. I tell
Right.
them, for your safety and your baby's safety, I really need to be able to listen quickly and accurately.
Right. But the flip side of that is the responsibility. You have to be informed enough to be willing to accept the risks and the downfall.
Yeah.
If the worst should happen, you need to know what that worst is, and you need to be willing
Right.
to say, that's
I
what I'm
choose-
choosing to live with.
And I know the consequences, right?
And that's not something that is as emphasized, I think, in another setting. So,
Well, I've had that situation where, you encourage somebody to do something you really feel like is important, and they said, well, we've read about it, we've decided we really don't want to do this. I say, are you might want to rethink this particular one. Still your choice. They make the choice. I chart the notes, and sometimes the outcome isn't what they had hoped.
right.
But then it's their responsibility because they're the parents.
Right. Right. So it is weighty, and it feels weighty, and there's that responsibility.
And sometimes they don't want to take it.
right.
Sometimes
exactly.
they realize, oh my gosh, I'm the parent. This baby's not born yet, but I'm the parent.
Right.
And I have to make this decision, and I need
Right.
to make sure I make the right one.
Right. But I think that type of setting and that relationship is so crucial, and it's amazing to have that opportunity prenatally and during birth before you become a parent. Because like you said, you're a parent when you're pregnant. And so
Right.
going
You're
through this
parenting already.
process of letting it sink in that I'm responsible for my body and now this other life. And when that burden, that responsibility is placed on you, you get to grow.
And I remember the first time I was pregnant, I mean, it's been 30 some years ago now. I didn't think about that. I just knew that I would go to the doctor, and the doctor would make my decisions for me. I didn't have to worry about what one I would make, because they would tell me, this is what you need to do. This is what test you need to have.
Right.
This is when you need to come in. This is, how you need to handle labor. And I was totally okay with that then.
Right.
Until I wasn't.
Right. So, yes, that prep work is so important.
Very important. What about families?
Yeah.
Because even though you've chosen home birth, like, I don't know if you experienced this, but even when I chose to do home birth, I had family members that were like, are you out of your mind? I mean, and I remember thinking that about my sister-in-law, because she was having home births long before I even considered it. In fact, I was at one of her home births and thought to myself, does she always have to go against the grain? Does she always have to be that, 2% of the population that has a different opinion about something?
Yeah.
And I totally respect her, and I'm thankful to her now, because she was part of the reason I became a midwife. But at the time, so you're going to come up against opposition even when you've made a decision. You have to be able to take that responsibility of handling that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I don't know if you experienced that.
A little bit. Yeah, I think the first time around.
Especially
because
the first
it was
time.
new to our
Right.
whole family, both sides.
And they're like, you haven't done it before. What if it doesn't work out right? Don't you want to wait till the second one to try
Right.
it?
So I think there were quite a bit of nerves and nervousness, going on with that first grandchild thing.
Yep.
But
And it's all out of love. It's not that they're being harsh. They
Right.
just truly want everybody to be safe.
right. So trying to
My
prep
legs fall asleep.
extended family or guests or people that are going to be at your birth, because again, that's one of those freedom issues. Shannon always likes to say it's your party and
It's your birthday party, not mine.
you get to invite who you want to be there, and that's a huge freedom. But at the same time,
But talk about that a minute. Who do you want to invite to your birth? And who should you not invite to your birth?
right. Well, I think that's one of those things, again, that is hard to envision the first time around. Some people get a little overexcited and want to invite lots of people. Or the opposite. Maybe you think, I'm such a private person, I'm not going to have anybody there.
Right.
And then you actually needed more support. Or vice versa, where you invite a bunch of people.
We always laugh that it ends up taking 4 adults to help one baby out.
Right. But then there's those times where you get excited and invite the photographer and the friend and the doula and the mom and the mother-in-law, and pretty soon
You're
the
like,
labor has stalled and the midwife is, gently and kindly kicking people out because
I've
it's
sent
not
people
working.
out to dinner before. Because
Go run this
labor was
errand.
kind of stalling, and then the baby comes while they're gone.
Right.
Go figure.
Right. So again, this is one of those responsibility things of planning the birth and prepping the people that are going to be there. Another huge part of this kind of care is prepping your kids, if you already have kids,
Right.
and your husband is a huge part of this because you're a team.
And I know my husband has shared with me that he wasn't totally and completely comfortable with the whole home birth thing even when we did it. And I hear this a lot. Dads will tell me, it's important to me because it's important to her. So whatever she wants, I'll support. And then I'll have dads come sometimes for the consult, and they're almost sitting here like this. And that they
Arms
got
folded.
drugged there and that they really aren't all into this. And that worries me.
Right, for sure. So, but husbands really are a huge part of this, and so
They need to be on board.
That's going to be something that we talk about eventually. Interview some dads, get
gonna
the
be
guys
fun.
involved on this whole process because it's
view.
huge.
Yeah.
But we have resources, books. We include kids and dads and prenatals and in this whole prep process because
It's a family event.
it's a family event and it's a normal part of the continuum of life and this journey. And
It's
so
not an illness or disease. It's a normal, natural event in the course of your day.
yeah, right. So getting the whole family on board is really a hallmark of home birth midwifery
Right.
care as well.
Right.
Okay, so we are going to end with just a funny story from my past to illustrate this point of prep and not prepped. And I won't use names, but if my friend ever hears this, she's going to know
She'll know who she is.
But this was long before I was a birth assistant. I had a passion for birth, but I was just still contemplating doing this. And my friend was staying at her parents' house because her husband was fishing in Alaska, and someone else was watching her younger kids. And she went into labor a few weeks before she expected to. She really wanted to wait until Dad got home. What?
Nothing was ready. Not a thing.
So this is like that whole, I'm having a home birth, I need to be prepared thing. She went into labor just like that, and she's having these good rocking contractions. The midwife is 45 minutes away or more. And her parents were really not even that comfortable with her having
and she was at
her
their
birth
house.
at their house. And so all of a sudden, and she had no supplies like ready or in a place. And so we were sending people out to the store to grab stuff. I was running around, trying to play midwife and doula and birth assistant all at the same time, and friend. I would help her through a contraction and then run to the other room to get some towels and throw the towels in the dryer. And the dad says, you can't have those towels in the dryer for too long. The house is going to catch on fire.
Good
and
grief.
So, we had no idea how fast this baby was going to come. But it was such a case in point of, she wanted to get in the water.
Yeah.
Where's the birth tub? Where's the liner? Nothing was blown up. Nothing was set up. And so I've seen firsthand the chaos and the mayhem that can ensue.
Not exactly the environment you want to give birth in, right?
No,
it's supposed
it wasn't
to be calm and relaxed.
peaceful, and people were running around every which way. So it was pretty comical. It did end well, but everyone was a little harried from the experience.
Wow.
So having your stuff together, having your plan, having plan A, B, and C, being flexible with those plans, all these things are seriously important responsibilities for having a home birth.
The big takeaway, be prepared.
Right.
So we will see you next time on More About Birth, and maybe we'll talk about this some more. It's kind of a deep subject.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for joining us.
See ya.
More About Birth is intended for educational purposes only. Please go to naturalcaremidwifery.com to read our disclaimer.